This is Scott the Fix-It Guy. Today we have a GE washer dryer laundry center, and it is not spinning, it is not agitating, so something has gone wrong with the motor. So we're going to take a look. We have these flashing lights and it fills and drains, but we're not getting any action from the motor for agitation or for spin. So we're going to remove this panel by taking out two Phillips head screws and then pull it up toward us, get it off to the side. I sped up the camera here a little bit. We're going to use a paint scraper to push in on two clips as we pull back on the front panel. So we push in and then pull back on the panel. The panel comes towards you, and then you can lift the panel out toward about 45 degrees and then lift it off of the bottom clips that are holding it in. This gives you good access to the motor. You can see what's going on. When I looked in here, what I found is just tons of socks that disappear in the laundry, and there was a pair of underwear wrapped around the motor, around the cooling fan. And this is very common for this model. When the machine gets overloaded, stuff falls between the tub and the upper panel and falls down into this area. And as things are spinning around, it gets wrapped around the belt or wrapped around the motor. So I thought that maybe that's all that was wrong. It's just the motor was jammed. But it turned out that all this stuff had also knocked a little speed sensor, a tachometer sensor, out of the motor. So you can just get a new one, or you can actually put the old one back in. It's a little bit involved, but what I need to do next, I have it unplugged. I got to disconnect these two modular connectors that are for the motor, and then I have to remove two bolts to get the motor out so I can work on the little speed sensor called the tachometer. So I'm going to undo these two clips. I've run into this several times on this same machine due to the same cause of overloading, and stuff gets down to this area and it just rips the little speed sensor right out of the motor as things are spinning. So we're going to push in on the tabs and just disconnect these two modular connectors, and then we're going to use a 1/2 inch socket to take out the two bolts that are holding the motor to the tub assembly. Actually not too difficult to do. Once we get it out, we have to remove the motor pulley, and it's held in by a little hex screw. For me, the hex screw wouldn't let go, so I had to actually remove the tachometer assembly in an unconventional way by prying it out between the cooling fan and the motor assembly. But ideally, you'd want to remove the motor pulley, because it makes it a lot easier. So I'm just spinning off those 1/2 inch bolts, and just be kind of careful here at the end so you can see how those bolts and the bolt casing all go back together. Just take it kind of slow. I'm doing the right side and left side, and gradually just letting the motor lower down. So the one on the left let go, and there's the bolt and the little casing for it. Here's the one on the right, and then the wires are held in by a little zip tie, so you can clip that zip tie, or you can kind of pry it out from where it's held in. There it is in the back. And then once you get that out, you can pull the motor out. So I used a pair of needle nose pliers to pinch it so I could get it to let go. But you could just clip it. Either way is okay. So here's the needle nose pliers. This is the same procedure you could use if you had to put a new motor in, but these motors last a long time. I think that'd be unlikely. Usually there's something else going on, like in this case that little tachometer had just come loose. And it has an optical sensor that sees the cooling fan as it spins and tells the computer how fast the motor's going. And if the computer can't get that signal, it won't run the motor. It'll send an error code. You get these flashing lights and no motor response. So here's the motor, and you get this little wire with a tiny circuit board connected to it, and that has a little can't remember the name of it. It's not an LED, but it's light. It's like a light emitting diode, and then it bounces the light back. And all you got to do is just get this plastic casing that it sits inside out from between the cooling fan and the motor. So again, the best way is just to use your hex tool and spin out the little screw that holds on the pulley. But in my case, it just stripped it. I think it's poorly made metal, so it didn't let go. So what I did is I just used a standard head screwdriver to kind of pry up on the plastic case that holds the tachometer circuit board in position, and I just took my time and pried it gently out from between the cooling fan and the motor. If you go slow here, you can do it without damaging anything. The plastic material that holds the tachometer in position is very pliable, so it's not that hard to get it out this way. But again, ideally the best way would be to remove the motor pulley and the cooling fan assembly first by taking out that hex screw. Usually an Allen wrench will do it, but for me it just wouldn't let go. So I'm using a standard head screwdriver to just pry that plastic case out. These machines actually do really well and last a long time if you can avoid overloading them and also avoid washing really heavy things like bathroom mats or blankets. You just use sheets and clothing and towels. It'll last a long time. You can just buy this new assembly also. It's pretty cheap by putting in a search for your model number and then looking under the term speed sensor or tachometer. So I got the circuit board pushed back into its case and pointing up toward the cooling fan so it can sense how fast the cooling fan is spinning. And now I'm just going to put the motor back in. So kind of get it in position, and then I put in this little protective metal cowling, goes in next. And then this part's a little tricky because the motor's slightly heavy. I'm going to put the bolt through, and then you're going to lift up on the motor to support it while you just start that screw by hand, spin it in. You just get a couple of threads in there, and then you can do the other side. So I'm just trying to line up that bolt with the hole that goes into, and then I just want to spin in a few threads, and then I'll go to the other side, do the same thing, and I'll get the motor tight. The bolt on the left, if you're facing the machine, that one pivots, but the one on the right allows you to tighten the belt. You can get the belt fairly snug before you tighten down the bolt. So the best thing to do is to get both bolts into position and then put the belt on, and then you can tighten the one on the left almost fully tight, and then pull on the motor as you tighten the one on the right, and that makes that belt nice and snug. To put the belt on, the easiest way is just put it on the small pulley first, on the motor pulley, and then put it on the transmission pulley, and then just using your fingers you can turn the transmission pulley and it'll feed itself right on. It's always the technique for putting on belts is put on the little pulley first and then the big pulley and then just turn the big pulley. So I've got the bolts both in and I'm pulling the motor toward me as I tighten up the bolts so I get a nice snug fit on the belt. There was a lot of socks and things that had fallen in there. So before we do the front panel, we're just going to hook these modular connectors back together. One of them is bringing power to the motor and the other one is going to be sending the tachometer speed signal to the computer. Another common problem for this machine when it won't spin is the lid lock sensor. It's a magnetic sensor that lives up in the upper left-hand corner of the top panel. The wire will break because the tub gets knocked around with heavy loads, and it pulls so hard on it that it snaps the wire, and the machine won't go to spin unless the computer thinks that the door is shut, and it can't tell the door is shut because the wire's broken. Very easy to fix though. You can just reattach the wire, or you can put in a new lid lock, new lid sensor. So we're just letting it go through its cycle, letting it drain, and we're going to make sure that it will engage on spin. When it first starts to spin, it'll do it in segments. It'll spin for a little bit, then stop, then spin, then stop, and it's just sensing the load, and then it'll start to ramping up on speed. So we got it set for spin. Press start. And then we get the red lid lock came on, so we know that it is sensing that that the lid is closed. So there we go, we got some good spin action, and it's back to normal. So we're going to put the front panel back in. We put it on its clips and we just push it shut tight and it's done. We'll put back on that middle panel, put in the bottom part first, and then just add in those two Phillips head screws. One good thing that can help to avoid socks migrating out is if you put small items like socks or bras or underwear in a knit bag and zip it shut. It gets them clean, and it won't allow the smaller items to get down in there where they can wrap themselves around the motor or the motor pulley. Just get these Phillips head screws in and we are done. So just testing agitation, that's working good too. So thanks so much for watching. Hope this has been helpful to you, and please subscribe to our channel when you get a chance.